Good evening. The American war on terror in Afghanistan began in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks. In the decade that followed, Washington gave Islamabad more than $18 billion in military and economic aid. Did it help? Look at the facts. The Taliban still controls more than 40% of Afghan territory. The war that has been on for 17 years shows no signs of ending. In fact, the Americans are sending more troops to help Kabul. So what are they doing wrong here? They're funding a state sponsor of terror to fight terrorists. It's counterproductive, to say the least. It's dangerous. And yet, repeated American administrations have failed to break the vicious cycle of warnings followed by dollars. On Gravitas tonight, we look at how the US Congress has once again shown hypocrisy and given a long leash to Pakistan. Pakistan has been given a new lease of life by the US Congress. The congressmen have passed a new law which says Pakistan is not obliged to act against the Lashkar-E-Taiba to get American aid. Here's a look at the dangerous American hypocrisy in fighting the war on terror.
We have been paying Pakistan billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, they are housing the very terrorists that we are fighting. But that will have to change, and that will change immediately. It is time for Pakistan to demonstrate its commitment to civilization, order, and to peace.
Despite President Trump's warning to Islamabad, it's business as usual in Washington. The US Congress has passed a bill that allows Pakistan access to aid from the United States, as long as it takes action against the Haqqani network. But the requirement to act against Lashkar-E-Taiba has been dropped from the list of conditions for the first time. The new National Defense Authorization Law lists the requirements that Pakistan needs to meet for $350 million in aid from the United States. But the fine print finds no mention of the perpetrators of the 26/11 Mumbai terror attack or the co-founder of Lashkar-E-Taiba, Hafiz Saeed, who has a $10 million US bounty on his head. The law is yet another reflection of the divisions within US lawmakers. Since President Trump took over, while the Republicans enjoy a majority in the US Congress, the party has been deeply divided over the policy decisions of the Trump administration. While India has managed to name and shame Lashkar-E-Taiba through joint declarations at BRICS as well as the United States, the declarations haven't deterred Hafiz Saeed, who still enjoys the support of the Pakistani establishment. During his campaign, Trump vowed firm action against the perpetrators of terrorism, but has achieved little till date. Bureau Report, WION.
Candidate Trump was loud and clear. He promised zero tolerance on any form of terrorism to the citizens of the United States. President Trump, though, has different priorities. He's taken a selective approach on dealing with terror outfits. He did warn Pakistan when he announced his new strategy for Afghanistan. But the warning clearly fell on deaf ears. There's no evidence to suggest that Pakistan took any steps whatsoever. And the US administration seems content with its token warnings. In August, the White House told the US Congress that it will extend $255 million in military assistance to Pakistan, but conditions apply. Islamabad can only access these funds if it is able to convince Washington that it is indeed doing more to crack down on terror networks operating from its soil. Since 2002, Pakistan has received more than $33 billion in aid from the US, and in recent years, the annual funding has dropped. But critics argue that America is not doing enough to keep Pakistan in check. The $255 million withheld by the Americans are part of the $1.1 billion aid package authorized by the US Congress in 2016. So where does that leave us and the world? Joining us this evening, G. Parthasarathi, former High Commissioner to Pakistan and former Information Advisor at the Prime Minister's Office. Also with us, Raymond Vickery, Jr., former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade and Development, also advisor on US-India relations. Good evening to both of you. G. Parthasarathi, to you first. What does this tell you? It seems to have become a pattern.
Well, if you keep listening to what Mr. Trump says, then it's often mutually contradictory. Yes, he initially started off by saying he would take tough sanctions against Pakistan, but he added the caveat that with regard primarily to what they're doing in Afghanistan. Now, this present bailout by the US Congress is really not a bailout. It's really what they call as coalition support funds, which is reimbursement of Pakistan for costs of logistic support that it provides to the United States to take arms, equipment and supplies across to Afghanistan through its soil. But still, this had been put in abeyance for some time. After Mr. Trump's loud proclamations, coming at this stage, it is a surprise. And I guess New Delhi will have to make a very strong démarche and ask them what this is all about. Because I have always held the view that this whole sort of rhetoric by Mr. Trump is primarily designed to get Pakistan to keep back from the Haqqani network. Knowing Pakistan's behavior, they will not do it. They will lie low, please the Americans, string them along, and then leave other aspects of it, including the promises about terrorism against India. So I think, as I said, this needs to be taken up. But frankly, I have no illusions on this score. This is what I expected. And it will be justified on the grounds that it is not assistance, it is reimbursement to Pakistan as coalition support funds.
Raymond Vickery, why this hypocrisy?
Well, I think that just shows that there's a lot of work to be done here in Washington on behalf of the U.S.-India partnership. I agree that it is very, very concerning after Saeed has had a $10 million bounty put on his head by the previous administration, and after Saeed has been declared a terrorist on the UN list, not to have steps taken which are effective. But it does indicate that in Washington, as in India, we have to build more support for the U.S.-India partnership. It can't be a mile wide and an inch deep. There has to be flesh put on the bones of this. And this, to me, shows that there's not being given adequate attention either in the executive branch or the legislative branch. Now, we've made some progress recently, it seems to me, in pulling together a quadrilateral relationship between Japan, Australia, India, and the United States. But on both sides, we're going to have to step up to the plate to show that we're more than just friends, but that we are really in this together in the fight against terrorism. There can't be any good terrorists and bad terrorists, which has been the Pakistani government view. The good ones being on the east side of their nation and the bad ones being on the west. There's only one terrorism. And so this indicates this is just an authorization in one bill. It does not reflect overall what the policy should be or will be going forward. So those of us who are interested, both Republicans and Democrats, have a lot of work to do to see that our rhetoric is fulfilled and there isn't this set of hypocrisy.
G. Parthasarathy, some argue that the American president should be given the benefit of the doubt. There's no love lost between the White House and the Congress, and so he cannot always control the actions of the Congress. Is that a fair argument, or do you think that the American administration should be looked at as a monolith?
I don't buy that. I've just come back from the United States. I was in Washington for a week. I met congressmen, I met members of the administration, and I met a whole lot of academics. Let me tell you, India is the one country which enjoys good bipartisan support in the US Congress. And when we were there, it was quite clear that the US terrorism effort was not just confined to Afghanistan, and that it covered South Asia. And even in his trip to Asia, President Trump has been talking of South Asia and the Indo-Pacific. So as I said, we are not the only people facing such counter-reaction. I think the South Koreans are finding it to their cost, and so are the Japanese. But we will have to follow this through. As I said, we do enjoy bipartisan support in the Congress, going beyond what the administration was saying. Even skeptics like Senator John McCain had come around. So let's see how the diplomacy plays out. But I'm quite clear in my mind that Delhi should make a strong démarche both in Washington and here, asking them to clarify what this is all about, considering the fact where they were a couple of weeks ago.
Raymond Vickery, for a moment I'll understand where the Americans are coming from. They have to worry about their own self-interest and their own policy and not what is in India's interest. But the fact is that the Americans have been fighting this war for 17 years, spending billions of dollars in aid to Pakistan to no avail. The writing is on the wall, and yet it seems administration after administration lapses into this hypocritical act.
Well, I don't know whether it's hypocrisy or what's going on, but I do know that there is a need to be able to do this not in the interest of India, but in the interest of the United States and in the interest of peace and security throughout the world. You can't have the divisions into good and bad of this terrorism. Now, what went on here exactly, we have to figure out, and we have to work on it. Obviously, the administration has been somewhat distracted this week, having the president out of the country. And when this bill went to conference, this provision, which was in there against Lashkar-E-Taiba, was taken out. So that has to be put back in, and it's going to take a lot of work.
G. Parthasarathi, you say Delhi should make a strong démarche, but there's a wide gap between what one should do and what one eventually does. We've just seen the kind of bonhomie and the good vibes that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi shared in Manila, calling each other friends, saying that there's strategic convergence. What, according to you, is it that New Delhi is going to do, actually?
Let me put it this way. Diplomacy has several levels. One is the public level and one is the private level. I think given the sort of ambience which prevails, no useful purpose will be served for India by, making this a strong public issue. But I think action should be taken in the diplomatic sphere to convey our regret and unhappiness that the word has not been kept. But yes, the process of engagement has to continue, and let's see how we can bring it back on track. But as I said, there is a strong Washington lobby, especially amongst academics and others, who believe that irrespective of how many American soldiers are killed by Pakistani trained terrorists, they should act nice. I don't think that plays, and frankly what President Trump has been saying about America first is quite contrary to that.
Raymond Vickery, my final question to you. Is there clarity in the American administration on how they want to proceed with this, what they want to do with Pakistan, or do we expect such flip-flops, if that's what it is? Do we expect this going back on their word in the months ahead?
Well, I'd say there's not a whole lot of clarity about anything in Washington these days. It's fish in a flash flood. And we do need more consistency, both in the House, the Senate, and the administration. But both sides have to step up here. We have to step up in terms of what happens to Lashkar-E-Taiba. India needs to step up. You know, India has been historically very, very reluctant to be considered an ally or too close to the United States. That has to change. There are foundational documents that have to do with defense cooperation, which have been lingering for over a decade. There's a lot of work to be done. But this relationship should be the most important bilateral relationship in the world, but it won't be unless there is substance to back up the rhetoric on both sides. I think we made progress yesterday, the day before, the ASEAN summit, the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. But obviously, this indicates that that this is not going to be something which is on autopilot and happens automatically. We've got to work on it.
Yes, it takes two to tango. I want to wrap this, but G. Parthasarathi, I quickly want to take your reaction. It seems that Raymond Vickery basically is saying that India should walk half the way.
Yeah, I entirely echo those statements. As I said, the Trump administration is not noted for consistency, but once the President of the United States makes a certain commitment, we should hold the administration to that. There are direct links now and a very close personal relationship between Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump. And I think there is only one other Asian leader with whom that sort of relationship exists, and that's Shinzo Abe. Though one was surprised by some of the very laudatory comments about Xi Jinping in China, but I guess that's diplomacy.
Yes, and then he said something else when he went to Vietnam. But thanks very much. Always good to have you, G. Parthasarathi, Raymond Vickery. Thank you for your time and for your perspective.